Expecting a miracle to make all this go away. You know they don't happen anymore.
So, Killers of the Flower Moon. This is Martin Scorsese's 27th feature film. That's narrative feature films. He's also directed like 17 documentaries, a ton of shorts. But in terms of feature films, this is his 27th one. Killers of the Flower Moon is a long gestating project that's been in development since 2016. Unfortunately, it experienced numerous setbacks due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And also, it had to find a home, it had to find a studio or a streamer that was willing to finance this. But once they did find a partner in Apple TV Plus who agreed to both finance and distribute the movie, they were able to get it in motion. And then also they established a theatrical distribution partnership with Paramount Pictures, and so it was going to receive a theatrical release as well. Of course, Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese's two most frequent collaborators. This is the sixth movie between DiCaprio and Scorsese, the 10th between De Niro and Scorsese. This represents a really, really, really long relationship between all of those three actors. And of course, this is also adapting a book which came out a while ago and tells the story of the Osage tribe during the 1920s and just the unfortunate tragedy that they experienced due to the actions of other people. And so I know we checked this out a while ago, but we would be remiss to not officially review this film, especially considering the performances, Martin Scorsese, obviously, and also the implications that it might have on Oscar season. So with all of that out the way, man, what did you think about Killers of the Flower Moon?
And we finally got De Niro and DiCaprio. Ain't that great? It's just a good feeling just watching them on screen at the same time with Scorsese. I thought that was just feel like something we've been waiting for forever. And it's like, oh, they finally did it. I feel like some other directors have some of those ties to clean up too. So I'm glad to see this here. Killers of the Flower Moon. Man, look, Martin Scorsese, if you've been listening to this podcast, is very beloved, I think, by both of us. He's an extremely good storyteller and director, man. He has crafted some of the most powerful work in his years. And what's funny is most movies of Scorsese movies, for me, they just make you hate white people even more. Every time I watch it, I'm like, dang, I don't like white people. Every time I'm like, what is happening? Why do they have to be like this? And this story is of no exception. I think he does a tremendous job of making his main character never feel like necessarily the hero in any of his stories. That's something that he's really good at telling, man. And as Jordan said, this really is about the Osage people in their land in the 1920s, and they have all these rights to their oil and what it looks like when people are trying to get to that money into that oil. And one of the few downfalls for this film for me was a slight lack of Osage outlook. Like I needed like a little bit more from the Osage nation. That again, these people were trying to get to the Osage nation, so I needed a little bit more from their perspective of what was happening to them. Though we did get a decent amount, it wasn't enough, I think, given the way the film kind of played out. Not only that, but I think kind of going with that is I really like Lily Gladstone in this movie. I think she is doing some really good things, and I think she kind of disappears in that third act of the movie a little bit, and I wish we just got a little bit more of her in her perspective. But I think this movie is it, man. He is doing some amazing work here. Scorsese is he's firing on all cylinders emotionally. He's firing on all cylinders from the performances he's getting from a lot of these people. He's even like killing it for actors and actresses that we've never even seen before on screen. He's pulling their performances up. I mean, I the way the movie looks is amazing. I can't actually couldn't even imagine not watching this on IMAX. Like I feel like am I going to be at home like upset when it comes out? Like dang, I wish this was on IMAX. It looks amazing. I think the theatrical experience definitely helped me here. Just follow along and taking it all about the way this thing looks, man. It looks really good. The score is tremendous. I think it was Robbie Robertson who had a score in this film. I actually really like the score in this movie. I think it's very well done. But man, I think the production is top notch in this film. Long story short, but beyond the production, Leo is killing it. I don't agree, however. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I think this is Leo's best work." I don't know if I agree with that. That's something I have to hold on to. But what I do like about Leo's performance, that's something I said earlier, is Scorsese does a good job of like not making the main character necessarily the hero, and I think that's the case here. Leo does such a good job of acting to where his mind, his heart, and his soul are in three different places, and he's forced to act in those three different places and kind of teeter these lines to not step on toes. And I think he's killing it in that way. I think this is still a tremendous performance from Leo. I just can't say that it's his best. That's something I wasn't sure of leaving the theater, that it was his best. But I think anybody who likes Scorsese, I think anybody who loves narratives, and especially the ones that are historically accurate by that way, that are just being dramatized a little bit, I think they'll absolutely love this film. And after thinking about it, man, this is just a movie that it was so anticipated that I think it lived up to the hype in that way, like perfectly. Does that make sense? Sometimes you get a movie is so hyped up, you're like, didn't live up to it. Sometimes you're like, it was good, but still wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. I think this delivered on everything that I think I was looking for out of this film, and I'm proud to say that, because it definitely could have went some other crazy way. So man, Killers of the Flower Moon is a tremendous film.
I will warn everybody, I have a lot to say about this movie because it is certainly at the top of one of my most anticipated films of the year. But Killers of the Flower Moon is such an enormous movie, really, in every sense of the word. It's enormous in regards to its themes that it's addressing, the significance of the story, and the context of American history. And then, of course, the runtime. It's a really, really long movie. But many of Martin Scorsese's films across his entire career, they examine the criminal doings of some really terrible people, whether it be mob bosses, gangsters, hustlers, crooked financial con men. He goes really deep into just why people have gone down a really, really dark path and developed some terrible tendencies. And we always see the inevitable downfall of these individuals, and the walls begin to close in, and they start to resort to betrayal and violence to preserve what they have left. That's a constant theme in many of his movies. But there's always, I think, what's really important to his films, a larger backdrop that takes place even beyond that on a macro level that goes beyond the characters that we follow. And the larger story often reflects, I think, where society either is currently or where it has been in the past, and the sins of society, and how society can really shape people into being terrible human beings. And
Right.
now with Killers of the Flower Moon, we see Scorsese tackling something that is often long been not talked about enough, and that's the United States and the treatment in the history of oppression towards indigenous people, and the monumental tragedies that they've experienced and that they've dealt with from these very real occurrences that showcase this never-ending, perpetual racism and white supremacy that has impacted Native American people for generation after generation. And so this is a really, really important work just based off of that. And of course, it's based off of a book. But I think what's really interesting about this film is that in its development, initially, this was more so doing a traditional adaptation of that book, which was going to be closer resembling that of a procedural, a police procedural, because the book, I haven't read it, admittedly, but in research, I found that the book more so resembles and talks about the formation of the FBI. And in the development of this movie, Leo gets a hold of the script. He reads it and he's like, actually, I shouldn't be the Tom White character who's, one of the agents that goes down to investigate the murders. I should instead be Burkhart and switch the roles there. And we should also pivot the story to focus a little bit more on the Osage people and how this impact and this tragedy really, really affected them. And I think that was a good choice. It's not perfect in the execution, but I think that instead of making it a procedural like it was initially going to be and turning it into more of a story about how this indigenous tribe was affected by these heinous acts, was a really, really effective decision that certainly I think makes it more impactful and more emotionally resonant. And I want to start off with, DiCaprio and De Niro in this movie in terms of their performances. Again, Scorsese's two most frequent acting collaborations. This is not the first time they've been on screen together. They've done movies. They've done This Boy's Life, and they did a little funny short feature film with Scorsese, The Audition. But this is the first proper feature film between the three of these gentlemen, and I think that having that just resulted in excellent performances. With Leo, he's doing something completely different that we haven't really seen him do before. He's playing somebody who is, I think, subservient to a certain extent, but he's also kind of dopey and kind of dumb and a person that you don't really believe can pull off this massive, just overpinning, sort of act against this tribe. You don't really buy into the fact that like this guy has what it takes to be that type of manipulative person, but he does slowly become that. He does become very manipulative. He becomes abusive, really, in a sense, not physically abusive, but in a psychological sense, he becomes abusive. But really, De Niro is kind of the true antagonist of the film. And now he's in the twilight of his career. He's towards the end of his life, as we know. Hopefully we get him for another 30 years, but we know he's getting up there in age. But, he's mostly doing comedies and fun films these days. But anytime he works with Scorsese always knows how to bring the absolute best out of Robert De Niro. And I think that when you look at his performance as King Hill in this movie, you get to see like a character that represents evil, but not evil in the sense that we always represent as evil. Evil doesn't have to be loud and rambunctious and in your face. Evil can be in the background. It can be cerebral. It can be occasionally unassuming. Evil could be right next to you. It could be that guy that's like, I want to help you. I want to benefit you. I want to be there to help further your cause or further your people. And that's the role that King Hill plays in this story. He's actually helping the Osage people to the public, but behind the scenes, he's doing something much more sinister. And all of that stuff is rooted in greed and racism and white supremacy. And I don't think that there's really many actors alive who can play that type of role as effectively as De Niro can, because there's something about the way that he just like plays it straight. He doesn't add a bunch of nuance. He doesn't go too deep into who he is. It's just like straightforward and to the point. Like this guy is just an old man, like somebody you would see on the street and wouldn't think a second thought about, but he's actually masterminding this really horrific and heinous plot against the Osage people. And I thought the way that De Niro played it was absolutely magnificent. You also get some great third act appearances from Jesse Plemons, who I think is like one of the most reliable actors working today. Anytime he pops up, he's really, really good. Brendan Fraser and John Lithgow also pop up in the third act here. And they're doing some really cartoonish performances, but they work for me. I think Scorsese is one of the only directors who can bring together these tonally dissonant, different performances that are on opposite sides of the spectrum. Like you get this really dopey performance from Leo, you get the emotional centerpiece in Lily Gladstone, and then you get Brendan Fraser and John Lithgow. Again, two great actors. John Lithgow is like one of my favorite actors, actually. Hugely celebrated, but they're coming in and they are completely changing the tone of what's happening. Like it's almost outlandish how they're performing, but it works. Like Scorsese can bring that all together. But to get back to Lily Gladstone, she's the true revelation of this movie, the emotional cornerstone of the film. And you get to see this tumultuous journey that her character Molly experiences. And it's really heartbreaking because all of this is happening directly to her and her family. And she's locked into this relationship with Leonardo DiCaprio's character. And you see like that there's a true love and romance there, but underneath it is really something that's just terrible and tragic. And I think the way that she performed it, for me, like it all was effective. And also like, even though she wasn't in as many scenes later in the movie, I never lost sight of her presence. I never felt that she wasn't a huge part of the movie, just because you always know that she is a part of being the victim of the circumstances and the situation here. But there's a level of power that she plays in every single scene. And I think that she's a lock for Best Actress at the Oscars, if you ask me, like an absolute lock. That'll make her the first Native American nominee. That's going to happen. And much has also been said, sort of as I wrap up here, much has been said about this movie's runtime. And it's 3 hours and 26 minutes long. That is a long movie. But one, breaking news, everybody, Scorsese does not make short movies. He's not in that business. The shortest movie he made was probably After Hours in the 80s. That was, almost 40 years ago. But he's also tackling such important subject matter, and he's often adapting things from books, from other movies that require these type of runtimes. They require a lot of runway. And so I think you just have to know that and make that agreement with yourself going into it, that this is supposed to be a story that takes place across multiple years. It's a really sweeping American epic, so it's going to take time for it to build up. And I think in the hands of other filmmakers and editors, it would probably be a disastrous result to have a movie go this long, but his secret weapon is Thelma Schoonmaker, his longtime editor, who's edited nearly every one of his movies. She proves once again why she is probably the greatest editor in film history. It's a reason she's won 3 Oscars, because for me, this is a 3.5-hour movie that felt like 2.5 hours. I never checked my watch. I never checked my phone. I was totally locked in because her ability to make the pacing of the story feel so natural and organic and for it to flow in the way that it does, I was just so in tune and so locked into the experience and surrendered myself over to it. I never for 1 second thought about the runtime because the story for me was so captivating, and her ability to edit his movies and to do so in a way where they're coherent and they make sense. She's just done it time and time again. Her best work has always been with him. You look at movies like Casino and Goodfellas and The Irishman and the way that they're edited, The Departed, like it's ridiculous how good and how well crafted they are. And so she is the best weapon in his arsenal, if you want to put it in those terms. Like she is her ability to bring these stories together is pretty much unmatched. And so for me, Killers of the Flower Moon, it just once again cements why I think Martin Scorsese is the greatest living American director that we have. It's not even close to me. And this late career streak that he's having, it's pretty astounding. When you think about his last 4 films, The Wolf of Wall Street, Silence, The Irishman, and now Killers of the Flower Moon, these are incredible feats and incredible achievements in cinema. And it's really, really rare that we see an artist at the top of his game in the twilight of his career at this level. Like it just does not happen. Like it's really kind of ridiculous that he's reached this new stride in developing, I think, these profound and poignant movies, because they all are just saying so many things and they have so much behind them and they're so layered. And so he's on, I think, one of the best runs of his entire career, which is saying a lot because in 60 years of filmmaking, I mean, he's made so many monumental classics. It's not even funny to count just all the things that he's done for the art form of cinema. I do want to ask you about something else though, because we've been talking about it and we talk about perspectives and the way that this movie was made. So again, this movie is based on a book. And as I said, the book often more so focuses on the formation of the FBI. The FBI really kind of came of age during this period of time and during these Osage murders. And the book focuses a little bit less on the devastation that I think the Osage people felt just during the course of these events. And because of that, I think now the reaction is somewhat mixed in terms of how Osage people are represented in the film. You kind of talked about it as well. But Christopher Cody, he's a part of the Osage tribe. He was also a consultant on the movie, and he was at the LA film premiere a few weeks ago, and he talked about sort of his complex feelings as it relates to the movie. I want to read a quote and kind of get your thoughts about it. But he says, quote, "As an Osage, I really wanted this to be from the perspective of Molly and what her family experienced. But I think it would take an Osage to do that. Martin Scorsese, not being Osage, I think he did a great job representing our people. But this history is being told almost from the perspective of Ernest Burkhart. And they kind of give him this conscience and kind of depict that there's love. But when somebody conspires to murder your entire family, that's not love. That's not love. That's just beyond abuse," end quote. So when you hear that, when you think about your own feelings in terms of how the Osage people are represented in this movie, I mean, what would you say just to all of that stuff? What would you say about some of the choices made creatively to kind of focus a little bit more on Ernest Burkhart, to give him, I think, a little bit more, give him a little bit more color in terms of the type of person that he was in the character. I mean, we don't know this person better than anybody on the street. Like he's a complete stranger, but the way that the film presents him, it does present that there was love between him and Molly, that there was a real genuine marriage and relationship and family. Do you think that detracts from the film? How do you feel about Christopher Coty's, sort of comments about it? How are you overall feeling just about, the Osage and their place in this story?
I think there would have been a way to bring both ideals home. One of those ideals being is that Ernest Burkhart was a complicated individual, right? And that he was dumb. I think there's a way to, I think they did kind of bring that part home, right? That the complicatedness of it all. Yes, he loved her, but yes, he's also helping his uncle kind of wipe out these people and get their money. And so there, I think that can be one case, but you also have to like hammer home the other part of the feelings of the guy you were just talking about. You also kind of got to bring home, man, these people were trying to like, how much morality is in earnest if at the top of it, he is part of this big mass thing to get rid of all these people. And so that is a part that I feel like they touched on, and it felt like they were moving that direction. For some reason, I just didn't feel like the foot being coming down, and I think that's where some of his feelings are too, maybe. And that it's like, yes, he was complicated, yes, blah blah blah, but had they again maybe for me maybe added one or two more. I needed Lily Gladstone to be a little more pissed off. Like, you know what I'm saying? I needed to feel her presence too, even though it was from the perspective of Ernest. And there is a good point there that is also like, it needs to come from somebody who is Osage. And part of me feels like if they were gonna do that, either again, somebody Osage needs to tell the story, right? Be the director, do all that, or him as somebody who was, somebody they talked to about on the film needs more input. And I think that's really it. And I think one of those two things would have brought it home even more than it was. And again, I like the story. I love the complicated nature of Ernest. It's like one of the best things in the movie for me is like, oh man, you can tell he really loves her, but boy, you are tearing this thing up, kind of type thing. It's literally like my favorite thing about the movie. But I think there are other ways they could have went about it that could have represented Osage people again just a little bit more, bring home a little bit more what happened to them overall, because it is by the end of it you're like, damn, Ernest. Instead, I wanted to say by the end of it, I would have been like, damn, the Osage people got fucked up. You know what I'm saying? Or, the Osage people were going through this crazy, heinous thing, which, again, is the movie. But by the end of it, it just feels like, damn, Ernest, and not, dang, Osage. Y'all went through this thing, kind of. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, one, I'll say that I think Christopher Cote, his comments here, I think were incredibly well said. I couldn't agree more. I think it does take an Osage person to tell it from their perspective and to tell it accurately about how this, these turn of events would impact an entire tribe of people.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, the sad reality is that this movie would never get made with an Osage director at this level.
Exactly.
You're not going to get this level of talent. You're not going to get a Leonardo DiCaprio or Robert De Niro or Martin Scorsese unless a Martin Scorsese makes it. You're not going to even get this type of budget. This movie's made for $200 million. It's ridiculously expensive how much it cost. And so there's a bit of a push and pull, I think, that people have to deal with this in terms of like their relationship to the film, because if it's not at this level, if it's not made for this high quality, this high caliber American type of film that's going to be given all this money and all these stars, how many people are really going to dive deep into the book or just the general history about the Osage people to learn more? Probably not many. And I think that that's like, it's valuable that this movie was made, and even made by Martin Scorsese. He's a white man who probably shouldn't be making this, but I think to be the most sensitive and the most caring and empathetic that he can be from his position, I think he did a pretty good job. I think it was actually like pretty well done from that perspective to go as far as he did with it and to bring on Osage people to consult on the movie. But there is only so far he can go. There are going to be restrictions and limitations to that, to where he can't tell certain aspects of the story like an Osage person could. I hope that an Osage person gets to still tell this story from their perspective. I hope that that can still happen. I'll watch it, whatever form it takes, a TV show, a documentary, a movie, I will watch it. But I do think that there's a reality when you talk about Hollywood and business, all of that stuff factors into like just this movie existing in the first place. But Christopher Cote is absolutely spot on. What I will say, though, about Lily Gladstone, I actually felt like that by the end of it, I did feel more empathetic and caring of the Osage people, just because, without spoiling it, the last scene of this movie, I've never seen anything like that done before. Like the last scene and its execution and how they wrap up the story and just sort of the matter-of-fact perfunctory nature of it, and how just how fucking sad you felt because of just like the turn of events and how they played out throughout the course of history. Just kind of, it kind of nailed home the message for me. Like, yeah, this all happened. It's really terrible and tragic. This was like mass genocide, essentially, and nothing was done about it. And that's like the most fucked up element about this whole thing. And the way that it was delivered was delivered in such a unique way that I've never really seen before.
Cool.
And I thought that was really effective, because you just have to see it in order to really understand that. Yeah. But overall, I think that this is like a really profound achievement for a lot of people. And maybe Lily Gladstone said it best herself. She talked about Osage people potentially seeing this movie. You know, she said to them, like, see it when you're ready. See it when you feel like you have the capacity to see this, because this is a real story. And this affected people that, you know, it's probably modern day Osage people who knew some of the individuals affected by this directly, you know, so to engage with it is going to be a really painful experience. And so I think that that's like the best takeaway from it all is that she's doing her part to tell this story and to shine a light on it, but she's also recognizing that everybody has to approach it differently, and everybody's going to address it differently and kind of deal with the repercussions of it, and the emotional impact and toll that it's going to take on a person to be able to take in the story. And so I think that that's really something to kind of take away from the whole experience of the film. But folks, those are all of our thoughts about the new Martin Scorsese movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. If you've checked this out, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.